I thought I would tell a story which I know is not, in fact, not true, or at least part of it is not true, concerning the Civil War. On the board of Hiwassee College, there was a man named Crawford Vaughan, and when the Civil War was starting, he went to Sweetwater and raised a unit to fight in the Civil War. Eventually, he was at the battle or the siege of Vicksburg, and his unit played a fairly important and unfortunate role in the war. But anyway, one of the young men who enlisted in his Confederate unit was named Lieutenant Joseph Devine. He was a medical doctor and a student at Hiwassee College. Well, he stayed around here, and although he had signed up to serve in Crawford Vaughan's Confederate unit, at the fall of Vicksburg, the whole unit was captured, and they didn't really want to make them prisoners of war. Neither the Union nor the Confederacy was well prepared to house or imprison or feed veterans. So, as a kind of compromise, they had all of the Confederate veterans at Vicksburg swear an oath that they would not fight anymore in against the Union. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Devine enlisted at the beginning of 1865 as what they called a 100-day man. That means his enlistment would only last for 100 days. The war was ending by then, and the Union figured they didn't really need many more soldiers after that, and he became a 100 days man. At this point, Crawford Vaughan had reassembled his unit, and he made a series of raids into several counties in East Tennessee, all the way from Chattanooga up to Madisonville. I found a newspaper story about Crawford Vaughan's raid on Chattanooga, and one of the writers of this newspaper article complains that he lost his purse and his hat to the Confederate troops. Well, Crawford Vaughan raided Monroe County, and he sent a special unit to find Joseph Devine and arrest him. Well, now, there was in Madisonville a medical doctor named Upton. Dr. Upton had a very large and beautiful house right behind the courthouse, what is now the police station. and that was his home. Upton had particular sympathies for the Union. Well, Joseph Devine discovers that he's being hunted by Confederate soldiers. He had enlisted in the Confederacy, and as they say, he had turned his coat. He became a Union man. Well, Dr. Upton hid him in the basement of his house. Now, Crawford Vaughn had sent about 20 men to hunt down this turncoat and arrest him. Well, he's holed up in the basement of Dr. Upton's house. Now, there is a letter by John Hamilton Bruner that claims that he, Bruner, was in Madisonville as this was happening. The story goes that a soldier from Georgia went down into the basement trying to persuade or force Joseph Devine to come out. Instead, Joseph Devine shot him. Well, he kind of limps out of the Devine out of the Upton house, and Dr. Upton removes the bullet from him. And John Hamilton Bruner, who was a Methodist minister, comforts the young man as he is dying. And he says the young man gave him the address of his mother and asked Dr. Bruner to send the bullet that killed him to his mother. And so he died. Well, Devine is still in the basement. 20 Confederate soldiers under the command of John Crawford Vaughn are waiting outside. Well, finally, they threaten to burn the house down. Well, Dr. Upton has a very nice house, and he doesn't want it burned down. So he goes down and he persuades the very reluctant Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Devine to come out, surrender himself. He was force-marched by the Confederates to Chilhowie Mountain in McMinn County, where he was given what is called a drum-top trial and found guilty of treason against the Confederacy and was hanged. End of the story, at least according to the letter written by John Hamilton Bruner. Now, if you pay attention and you think a little bit about human nature, you will discover that it ain't so. Remember, there were 20 Union soldiers surrounding the Upton house. One of them, a young man from Georgia, goes down, is fatally shot, and dies. And then, under the persuasion of Dr. Upton, who doesn't want his house burned down, Joseph Devine comes out and is forced to walk to Chilhowie Mountain. Now, think about that. What is wrong with that picture? Well, I can tell you. 20 soldiers were surrounding the house. One of their comrades has been shot dead. What are they going to do? They'll just wait for him to come out, of course. No. That did not happen. In fact, there is a study of this entire episode in what are called the Bill Baker Papers.
Editor's note. Hi, Brady here. What Dr. Allen meant to say was the Robert Barker papers. Not Bill Baker, Robert Barker. And those can be found in the McClung Museum. Thank you.
They are in the big museum in Knoxville, and I've gone through them. Bill Baker was an excellent researcher. He left no stone unturned. He read the military accounts of this event. He even went to the descendants of Joseph Devine's brothers and sisters and asked them what their family tradition said. And he writes this all up very clearly. Now, there are military records of the trial of Joseph Devine on Chilhowie Mountain. He was very much alive. He had walked there, and he was hanged. Now, if you think about it, there are 20 Confederate soldiers surrounding the Upton house. One of their numbers has been shot dead. They're not just going to stand around out there and hope that he might come out and have lunch with them or something. It's a military situation, and they would not have waited for Joseph Devine to come out. About 8 or 10 of them would have gone downstairs with their guns blazing, and Joseph Devine would have been what William Gannett Brownlow called ventilated, meaning shot full of holes. Now, if that's not enough, I've already mentioned that John Hamilton Bruner was forced to leave Monroe County and spent most of the Civil War living in Adams County, Illinois, with his brother and with his wife and his children. And I have letters in the archive from Bruner indicating that he's finally coming home. However, on the day that Joseph Devine was holed up in the basement of Dr. Upton's house, that was January 28, 1865, and I have in the archive a letter from Bruner saying he was in western Kentucky with other relatives on that date. He was not even in this county. And the rather bizarre story about, send the bullet that killed me to my dear mother. That's pretty obviously a lie, because we know Bruner was not in this county. He could not minister to a dying soldier when Bruner was, in fact, in western Kentucky, visiting with relatives. So, where does this all come from? It comes from a published letter of John Hamilton Bruner that was published in a very prominent magazine of the time, the Confederate Veteran. What Bruner is doing in this letter is positioning himself, and he at the time was the owner of Hiwassee College, as a Confederate sympathizer. Now, if you have ever read, and everybody should read, the book that Bruner wrote, The Union of the Churches, you will know that in the 1870s, when he was a mature gentleman, Bruner was very strongly anti-Confederate. I think it's brave of him, but he denounces the Confederacy in Union of the Churches. He also tells us, we used to have, I suppose it's still there, letters and cards by Bruner talking about what was going on in the 1870s into the 1880s at Hiwassee College. He says that every time there was any kind of social event at Hiwassee College, groups of young men with Confederate sympathies would show up and break up the events and generally act mean. What Bruner was trying to do by publishing a letter like that in the Confederate Veteran was to position himself and to position Hiwassee College as pro-Union, though he had published a great deal against the Union. And that's why this fatuous story about, "I'll send the bullet to kill me to my dear old mother down in Georgia." That never happened. So that's how we know, first of all, the Baker Papers, which are extremely well written, very thoughtfully written, thoroughly researched. He did not have the advantage of going to the Hiwassee archives for his research because they didn't exist at the time. Well, they existed as some boxes of old papers, but that's all. But Baker says absolutely nothing about a soldier being shot in the basement of the Upton home, and a detail like that is absolutely certain to have caught his attention, and he says nothing about it. So that's why I know that this wonderful story from Dr. Bruner's pen actually never happened. He couldn't have been here. He could not have been in Monroe County at the time because he was writing a letter in western Kentucky, and in those days travel was very slow and all of that. And the fact that those 20 Union soldiers standing around outside the Upton house would absolutely not have let John Devine voluntarily walk out of the house and more or less voluntarily walk to Chilhowie Mountain. It just couldn't have happened. So that is a story that didn't happen.